As we get started in the conversation, I know you guys from Competition Barbecue, but I don't know a ton of background. How'd you guys get into barbecue in the first place?
It's a funny story that's actually quite timely. You want to kick it off, Mr. Freak? Because he sort of dragged us into this barbecue world, and I kind of came along.
Yeah, I think we'll tag team this one. This is a story we've definitely told before, but I'll give you just a little background on how we came to the world of barbecue. So I grew up in Kansas City, and my dad was the kind of barbecuer who grilled on a PK grill. That was his kind of barbecue, and mostly he just overcooked the heck out of some chickens every week. He could cook a pretty good steak, but he would just destroy chicken, drink 6 beers, and watch it burn on the PK grill, which I still have, by the way, his original PK. But, being in Kansas City, there was great barbecue to be had. And once I got my own set of wheels, I started exploring barbecue beyond what my dad was making. So places like Gates and Arthur Bryant's and Smokestack at the time, now called Jack Stack. That was kind of my entree into it. And you probably approached the cuisine of barbecue a little different.
Yeah, I'm Greek, so barbecue for us was roasting a lamb, the whole animal, outside on the rotisserie, and those are some of my earliest memories. We're actually doing a family reunion in a couple weeks, Logopalooza, doing a lamb and also adding the barbecue. So my dad was a great cooker of lamb, but it's kind of similar to Brian's dad with the chicken on some kind of old rusty Weber kettle. Not the greatest, and barbecue, the barbecue sauce, not, smoking the meats. So that was a whole new sort of part of the barbecue and grilling world that Mr. Freak kind of brought me into.
Yeah, and then flash forward a couple of decades, and for Valentine's Day, this is probably 15 years ago by now, Anne bought me this thing called a Groupon. I don't know if they still exist, but
they do still exist.
A printed piece of paper where you got a ridiculously good deal to go do something. And what she had bought me for Valentine's Day was a class, so to speak, at a place called Rub Barbecue. It used to be up in Rogers Park. It run by a guy named Jared Leonard, who's gone on a lot of great things in barbecue. But we sat there, and he gave his Jared spiel, which was well refined even at that point in time. And, there was maybe 5 or 6 other folks sitting around, and nobody wanted to get hands-on. But he's like, hey, somebody want to rub a brisket? I jumped in because I'd never held a whole brisket before, and I want to rub that. So, that's kind of how I thought to myself, I really want to get into this thing. And a couple of years later, we entered our first competition.
No, you entered.
Okay, yeah, you take it from here.
First barbecue competition.
True.
Father's Day weekend. 20-year anniversary coming up. This is 10-year anniversary coming up. Oh my goodness, this is crazy.
Yeah, it is almost 10 years to the day since we got into this.
Wow, oh my goodness. So Brian signs us up, me kind of begrudgingly, because not understanding what we're getting ourselves into, to a neighborhood backyard comp, ribs and chicken. So we basically had your dad's old PK, we had a Brinkman that we alley picked, and we had somebody's old WSM. I'm not even sure where that thing came from.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we were, practicing and getting stuff ready, and anyway, lo and behold, show up, haul all this stuff to our first barbecue competition. We had way too much stuff, still kind of a hallmark of how Smoke Freaks, does things. We're over-prepared.
I remember we lost our pop-up in the first 20 minutes. We set up this, first of all, I messed up and bought a 12 by 12, which is just an El Cheapo pop-up. The real ones are 10 by 10 and made of steel or aluminum. This thing, as soon as the wind whipped around the corner, that thing folded in half, ripped out of our sight, and just tumbleweeded down the block, bouncing off other smokers.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't the best possible start, but it was a really windy day. It was blowing like gusts of 40 miles an hour, and we barely knew what we were doing, and we certainly didn't have our equipment game.
We were trying to do 3-2-1 ribs, and with all the wind and the loss of the pop-up and faulty equipment, somehow Mr. Freak did hot and fast. unexpectedly for the very first time. We didn't even know what that meant.
Oh my God. I was trying to run this old WSM at 225 and it was running 350 and my ribs are in. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I'm opening the door, spraying water on the coals.
Sure.
I mean, just absolutely going crazy. But, they turned out okay. It was a competition with real judges, but it was very strange. We had to turn in 6 chicken boxes, each one with one piece of chicken. For some reason, each judge got their own box.
One lonely rib.
And this was before COVID. I don't know what was up with that.
Interesting.
But yeah, we had I'd put 2 bones in a box and send them, but she had to make 12 kale boxes. And I think by that point, we were hooked. But then what happened?
So fast forward at awards, they call first place ribs for smoking freaks. And Brian starts to get up, and I'm like, that's not us. We're smoke freaks. And anyway,
it was us.
They got the name. Anyway, smoke freaks were born that day. It was us. Mr. Freak got his very first place ribs. And that day changed our lives. The hook was set.
Every rib I've cooked since then has been hot and fast. So
that's so crazy that one call can just completely get you hooked in something like competition barbecue. I mean, to tell you the truth, I was hooked on competition barbecue before I even competed. So for me, it was the Elk Grove. I don't know if you guys were around back then. Maybe 2010, 12, I think this was when Elk Grove had a barbecue competition. And we went there as a vendor. We had the Sweet Baby Ray setup, and we were just selling ribs. Yep. And they were having a KCBS contest there. And my uncle's like, I had no idea. I was at the shop working, and my uncle's like, you have to come see what's going on here. And I'm walking around, and there's all these guys setting up competition stuff. And that's when, do you guys remember the procrastinators? And
yeah.
We cook with them from time to time.
Oh, so they were there. And then who was the other guy? I want to say Dr.
Scotty Johnson.
Scotty, in those days. Yeah, Scotty. And then what's Alex's team name? Big dude Alex.
Dr. Porkenstein.
Dr.
Right?
Porkenstein, yeah. So it was
all
all
there at the end of the old school.
Yeah.
We missed that. The tail. You
came in after that.
So all those guys are there, and Dave's like, okay, cook a couple good slabs of ribs, and we're gonna bring them to these guys and pass them out. And I remember, Alex, I didn't know who he was, he didn't know who I was, and he's eating these ribs. He's like, these don't taste like anything, and I'm like, I'm used to everyone saying you guys have awesome ribs and stuff like that. And I'm like, what does he mean they don't taste like anything? I mean, for a competition person, I understand what he's saying now, but back at the time, I was taken aback. Anyways, we got to hang out with Shigs and Pitt. And I don't know if you guys have ever met them. They're a team from Indiana. They were pretty into it back then. They were winning GCs and stuff like that. But just the level of camaraderie and people giving each other the business, and I was hooked. And I didn't even compete yet. I'm like, this is amazing. They were drinking all night. They were cooking barbecue. They were just hanging out, and it was just amazing. So I'm like, we have to do this. And that's when we met John Bobinette. I was on my first competition team was actually Church of Swintology with John and Ron, and then they had another guy, Todd, that they used to cook with too. And it was love at first sight for me as well. And then once we did actually compete and we did get a couple calls, then it was game over. I'm like, I'm in. This is amazing. It was so much fun.
I love that you really jumped to what is the end point of all of this. And it is about that family. It's about the camaraderie. Yeah. Because, no matter how good you are, you're not going to win every weekend.
No.
And if you're only there because you're trying to win, you're probably in the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because
you're going to get disappointed real fast.
Yeah. You're going to have rough days for no good reason. You're going to have rough days that were your fault. You're going to have things go wrong. And it's great to be competitive, and you have to bring that to it. But it's not racing or gymnastics or wherever, where if you have the best program, the best skill, the best whatever, you are probably going to win. It's
Right.
not like that in barbecue.
No.
On any given Saturday, anybody out there on that field can win.
Right.
And that's one of the really great things about it.
It is so cool, and it's so unpredictable. I was just talking to Darren, and he was telling me, or I brought up the story when we were in, I think you guys were at this competition too, in Green Bay. I think it was 2018. And the first day, he got like 42nd in pork. And the next day, he got first place in pork. And he just walked, shaking his head across the stage, saying, it's the same thing I turned in yesterday. You know, and he goes from like...
The week before, and the week before, and the week before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at that level, I mean, everybody can execute the exact same program weekend after weekend after weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was kind of funny. I mean, in the early days of your learning to cook barbecue, brisket is like Mount Everest, you know,
Mm-hmm.
You're almost afraid to trim and tackle your first one. But after we'd been probably by our 25th brisket in competition, that was literally the most low drama, easiest of our 4 cooks, because it was just such a simple program, you know, and everything was so dialed in on our trimming, our temperatures, that thing took 3 hours, maybe 3:05, maybe 2:55, but that thing was done in a 10-minute window.
Right.
And that's how it is in competition. You have to be that dialed in and force the barbecue to bend to your will.
Unless you're poor, which we've had our ups and down moments.
We never bent pork quite to our will, at least. ACBS competition.
How far into the comps did you guys switch to the can smokers? I think when I was cooking alongside you guys, most of the time you had what was the brand of the...
Hunsakers
is
one of our go-to. Yeah. But man, the first year of competing, we were a total yard sale out there. I mean, we did, I think, the last... Lamb's Farm. We did the last Lamb's Farm, and we had to rent a van, and we had a pickup truck pulling a trailer. I had a backyard Jambo on there. I think we were cooking on a pit barrel at that time. We still had the PK grill, my dad's.
Yeah.
And
what'd you use the grill for? Did you finish the chicken on there, or?
No, it was there just to bail us out.
Just in case, yeah.
That's how we ruined the chicken.
Yeah, that's how you ruined the chicken.
Yeah. Yeah, until we switched to the drums.
And that that first year we had recipes and we had timelines, but we hadn't developed a competition program. And the next year I took a class from a guy named Uncle Bub down in Columbia, Missouri, and he was an American Royal winner 2010, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he was all Hunsakers, and I saw that class and I was just completely sold on that program, because here I am trying to cook a brisket over 8 hours on a Jambo, and while I'm also doing other stuff in a WSM and a pit barrel cooker. It just made no sense.
Yeah.
Once we got 4 identical pits, one for each of the 4 proteins, everything fell into place, because if one thing went wrong, it was contained. Yeah. It didn't spill over into anything else. And, we got to where we could do that on 2 cans if we had to, just by staggering our timelines. But it was just easier to run 4 fires.
Yeah. I really like the can program when you think about it like that, and the affordability, the mobility, and then the fact that you have this smoker for this meat and so on. That really goes with my mentality on a lot of things. That's not how I ever did it, but I really can jive with how that works. That makes sense to me.
When we were a 3-can team, then chicken and brisket would share the pit, and you better hope the brisket's out of there in time to start chicken, which is your first turn in. And later we ended up graduating to the 4 pits, 1 for each meat, which was very nice to have.
One thing I was talking to Malcolm, and something that if I went back and did more competitions, right now I'm not doing any. I would love to get back to it right now with the business and everything we're doing here, and then with my family. The kids have a busier schedule than I do, I swear to God. So I'm just trying to keep up. But if I ever did get back to it, one thing I've said is that I would hold my meats a lot longer. I would get them done, make sure they're out and rested. And I felt like the more I've done cooking barbecue for catering or for different events, it's like I don't see any downside to letting it hold and letting it rest. Where are you guys on that thought process?
Absolutely agree. At least on the bigs, I don't like
Yeah.
to rest my ribs long. We pulled those out. They were meant to come off at like 5 minutes after 12. Turn-in's 12:30.
Okay.
So that gives us time to rest them, maybe 10 minutes most.
We're not even cutting those to figure out what goes in that box until 12:18.
Yeah.
Turn-in starts at 12:25. We're moving fast at that point.
Yeah, but the bigs, when it comes to pork and brisket, I wouldn't want to rest it for less than 2 hours. So, and I've taken it as long as 3.5, and I don't think there's any problem whatsoever with that.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in KCBS, because can you possibly make it too tender? I mean, not really.
Yeah.
They want it overcooked, and a great way to just, do that and then let it rest out and kind of pull back together is, that nice long rest. You just got to make sure you're not continuing to cook it. You want it to be cooling down gradually during that time.
And I think chicken for me was something different too, with the Hunsaker cook, which ran differently if I was cooking on a different kind of drum. So that really just depends on your equipment and figuring out your program. But my chicken performed better the later it ran and the less it held. So there'd be moments where it's like, get this chicken out of here. We got to get boxing, and it's almost too hot to be able to figure out, which ones you want to turn in, whatever. But yeah, my chicken didn't benefit from
and I have a lot of barbecue experience. I'm a chef. I've been cooking my whole life, and you really opened my eyes to something about chicken, believe it or not. And this
what's that?
And when I started cooking with the drum, and we were talking about cooking the chicken to like 165, and you're like, you could cook it to 165 and get the juiciness that way, or you can cook it to like 200 degrees and get the fall apart type of chicken. And I would never thought about it like that, but even the 200-degree chicken is super tender. Like, it's juicy and tender in a different way than the 165. And I was like, that's a very interesting way to think about it. I've never heard anyone say it like that before, but it's absolutely true.
Now, folks, don't try that at home with just a piece of chicken right on your direct fire grill, cooking it to 200.
No, you need all the jazz to go with it.
You gotta have all the other stuff to make that work. But it does work. I mean, to me, that was my favorite competition food, was her competition chicken. Whatever was left over, and it got to be, there wasn't much. She only cooked 8 pieces
at the end,
and would put 6 in the box.
Only 8.
Explain to me Memphis in May. I've never gone to compete at Memphis in May. Pretend the audience has never been to a competition like Memphis in May. What can you expect going down there? Yeah. The setup and the atmosphere. How's that all set up like that down there?
First of all, I'm going to say it's about the most grueling barbecue experience I have ever had. Now, you run a restaurant, so you do it. You're used to just being on your feet doing barbecue for a whole week. Yeah. But what you don't have to do typically is build your restaurant in that week and then tear it down. So basically, that's really what you have to understand going into it, is at the end of this, part of the judging is about the hospitality experience you can put on for 3 judges at least, 7 judges if you're lucky enough to make finals. And they're expecting to have a great hospitality experience. It doesn't mean you have to be super elaborate and build a hardwood floor, but a lot of people do. Especially when it was down by the river, you're out in the mud potentially. Every year we would bring in upwards of 60 pallets and build out a floor, so if it happened to rain on competition day, our judges weren't standing in the mud. And we were hardly the only ones doing that kind of thing. So typically you roll in Monday and you start building out by Tuesday. You're getting your big giant tent set up, which is all contracted through vendors, getting all your decorations in place, buying a few $100s worth of live plants to decorate with, maybe laying carpet, maybe laying tiles. I've seen people lay pavers. I mean, it's just an absolutely insane experience when you think about all the effort, all the time, all the money that goes into putting on really what amounts to a giant, awesome barbecue party down by the river. Or this year it was in a parking lot by Tiger Stadium.
Was it easier in the new location?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So much easier. For one thing, it's not down the bottom of a hill.
Which means walking up the hill at the end of the day when you're beat.
Yeah, the riverfront location's at Tom Lee Park, which is right on the river. And Memphis is known as Bluff City because the city's up on a bluff and the barbecue competition's at the bottom of the bluff.
Wow.
So you're either walking up about a half-mile hill that it's pretty good grade, or you're going up a few hundred steps straight up that bluff.
Yeah.
And neither one of those are very fun after you've been on your feet for, maybe 24 hours straight.
Right. Oh,
if you're cooking a hog.
Yeah. So three proteins that folks are competing in: ribs, pork shoulder, and then whole hog. So it's all pork, a world championship cooking contest. So each of those categories has a first place winner, and then there's a winner, a grand champion from each of those first places. Contest starts over, and then
and at Memphis in May, you only cook one of those categories. Nobody cooks multiple categories. It's just you pick one, and that's what you do.
Yep.
But this year, there were a couple of whole hog teams that cooked both at Memphis in May and at the new Smoke Slam.
They did both?
They did both. They competed in both. A couple of hog teams, I believe, and probably other.
Those are big teams with lots of members,
Right?
Yeah, that's aggressive.
It takes a lot of people to do hog at that level anyway. You rarely see a team with less than 8 or 10 people. To do it in 2 different locations, you pretty much need.
And when you are doing whole hog, you have to cook 2, correct? Or you just cook 1?
No, you can cook 1 if you want. We've cooked as many as 3 and as few as 2 for Memphis. If you're doing just a regular MBN competition, a lot of times guys will only cook 1. Yeah. They present one half goes for the box and the other half is for the 3 judges they get. If you're doing a bigger or more prestigious one like Murfreesboro, we're usually going to cook 2 hogs for that. So we've got plenty to show lots and lots of judges.
Right.
But we did 2 this year, and that's probably the right number. You've got 1 you can really tear apart to make the best possible turn-in box. That's the first competition. That's
blind box.
Winning in the tent is super important. Then everybody gets 3 judges that visit them, and whoever wins between those scores within your category, the combined of your judges and the blind boxing in the tent, that's who goes on to finals. And then it's a brand new competition from there. Those guys are all competing against each other for who's going to win the whole thing.
What year did you guys hit finals when you were down there?
We made finals in 2019.
2019.
Yeah, we ended up 3rd place. And that was really an awesome day to end up on that stage.
So crazy.
Third in the world, whole hog. Wow.
We got back up there again this year with 7th place. John cooked 2 really, really great hogs. He had a great team of folks behind him. And we did a lot of retooling and practicing this year. In fact, thank you very much for being part of that.
Well, that's why probably big reason why we're having this conversation right now is we got to reconnect. And John called me and asked if me and Dave could come and give him some input on the hog that you guys were practicing, and listening to you, Brian, talk about the rubs and just the amount of knowledge and information in that 3 or 4 minutes that you gave was just like, that's what Dave and I driving away said, wow, we were really impressed with that part of the presentation. And I mean, it was really cool to see. And the hog was delicious for sure, but we really liked your part of the presentation. It was really cool.
The feedback that you were able to give us was very instrumental, and we took all that back and went back to the drawing board on how we were going to handle our presentation, and we ended up in a really, really great place. We had a couple of judges tell us that it was the best presentation they'd ever seen.
Oh, wow.
So
that's awesome.
It came a long way since you saw our
That's
first
really
draft.
cool.
And we really made it into something that it needed to be, but also had the personality and had that human connection that judges are ultimately looking for. It's about hospitality, and we wanted to make that come through every element of our presentation.
And what Mr. Freak here is talking about, that presentation, after you turn your blind box in to the judge tent, You have judges that visit you on site where you literally interact in person with the judge, and you put on a hospitality demonstration, and you have to serve them the 3 parts of the hog.
Kind of like on Pitmasters.
Kind of like
if
on
you ever saw
Pitmasters.
Pitmasters, it's kind of like that, except they're not picking it apart in front of you.
Yeah, and you basically present how you went from the raw, unfinished state that you started in to this finished product that you're serving the judges. That whole process, flavor, protein, fuel, equipment, etc. And so that's an in-person presentation, and you and Dave were so helpful, along with some other judges, to give us that feedback when we were doing our practice presentations, and that really helped us kind of evolve and pivot.
The other thing we did differently this year is a bunch of us from the team, John took us down there to take the judging class so we could all learn exactly what are the
smart.
judges
That's
being
really
trained
smart.
on. Yep, and ultimately, we came away understanding how we had been missing in our presentations, because we've won the tent 2 or 3 times, like literally the best box that went to the tent. Perfect scores.
The blind box, yeah.
And then just kind of fell apart in our presentation, but I don't think we had really internalized all of the things that they need to hear about. And at the end of the day, you don't have to be the world's best presenter. You have to tell them about all the things they need to hear about, and that's on their scorecard. And you got to make them happy while they're doing it.
Yeah.
Make them like you as a person, and relate to them as a person. Make them know that you care about the experience you're giving them. And I think that's really the secret to it. I've heard it put a lot of different ways. People say, no, it's like trying to pick up a girl at the bar. And maybe it is. Maybe that style would work for somebody, but that wouldn't work for the people on John's team, because we're a very humble group. It would not come across as genuine if we were trying to hard sell you on how we're the best cooks ever and we got the best thing you've ever had. It just wouldn't be genuine. So we played it very, very differently, but found a good way to connect with folks, and it worked out. We ended up 7th and back up on the stage.
That's awesome. I am very impressed by the Shed repeatedly having success up there. I mean,
so good.
They are not like a huge competition team. They don't do a lot of competitions. They do other kind of random stuff, but they're not like out on the circuit all year long doing it. So to be able to go in there and pull that off 3 times or whatever it's been, it's really impressive.
It's some good barbecue,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And they've got great hospitality, and that's what
I think that's a good part about
it. It makes complete sense if you think about it. They got the 2 things you need. You don't need to compete every weekend to go down there and win, but you got to have great barbecue and great hospitality.
Yeah.
Good people and a good story. And I got an Instagram invite from Flat Brad. So Brad at the Shed has an Instagram account, and he has a giant stand-up, like a Flat Stanley, but it's a giant
for Flat Brad.
So that ended up on stage at Memphis in May, and so fun people,
barbecue family,
fun hospitality.
They're a blast.